Hi, welcome to all. So in this particular video, we'll be talking about file. So let us understand one thing. Till now, what we have seen that we have used the function like scanf, used the function like printf. Okay, so we have used scanf in order to read data from the keyboard, and if you want to print something on the monitor, we have used this printf. So we have been using this console-oriented keyboard screen function like printf and scanf. And if you have seen very clearly, these particular functions are really useful for small volumes of data, right? So these functions, if you see, you have been used very fine when you are using small volume of data. And also, have you seen one thing? So whenever we are using this particular program and we are suppose taking some data and storing in num in the variable num, then you printing in the num itself, and once the program terminates, everything is lost. There is no data is associated with it, right? Okay, so now, having said this, till now we have been using the the function like printf, using this function as scanf, and we are using small volume of data, right? And we are not actually storing this particular data. So has a something is there, so where we actually think about storing large amount of data, we need to handle the large amount of data. Talk about even in university or in institute, student information system itself. So you may have around 4,000 to in a particular year. So if you consider a 4 year engineering course, so we may have around 16,000 for an university having so much of student information. Hospital management system, if you are to store the information of hospital like patients, doctors, right? If you need to put some population records and all these things, so are we able to handle such kind of thing using only the printf standard? Okay, and we have seen that data is not consistent. It is stored, right? So there has to be somewhere which we can store the data and we can easily retrieve the data. And as a result, in order to store and retrieve, the concept of files comes in, right? So now you would have understand that why we are talking about file itself. So typically with the small volumes of data, and we need to have the data which is persist, will continue to stay, right? And you'll be handling with real like applications, big application, as I give some example. So that cannot be only be catered to using printf and scanf. So that means we need to have some concepts, and that concept comes under file, right? So what is a file, right? So it is something which is it's a place in a disk where a certain group of related data we can store. Example, if I said your resume itself is a particular file, right? So where exactly you are storing, you're storing about yourself, like what skill that you have, what is your objective, right? What is your academic details, okay, what kind of certification course that you have done, your personal details. So all related data is stored in one particular area itself, right? That's what we call it as something like resume. So even like you have done some kind of C programs and all these things, right? So now this actually you understand as a file, a place or a disk where a related data is actually stored. And using a high level programming language, when talking about high level programming language, we are since we are talking about C programs, so it supports some a file operation, and these are like naming of a file, how to open a file, how to read a file, how to write a file, and how to close a file. So whenever you please understand, there has to be a name to the file, yes, and you have to open a file, and then we can do some kind of reading of the file, we can do some kind of writing on the file. And after that, once you have opened the file, we need to close the file. Why we need to close the file? Because that particular file, if you are using it for reading, next purpose, if you want to write, right, then you have to close it and you can start using it as a for writing purpose also. And apart from that, it will have some kind of memory locate it will be using some kind of memory. So we each time, why we need to keep on opening the file, we should close the file itself. Okay, so having said this, now what are the different types of file that we have? Okay, there are two type of files, usually a text file, or we call it sequence. Spelling is mistake little bit, sorry for that. Sequential file, and then we have binary file or random file. All right. Okay. So what is sequential file? Sequential file is where you have a sequence of characters, okay, and it is organized in a line, okay, and once we if you see, it will always be terminated by new line itself. You are using this text file itself in a day-to-day life, okay. And how are you going to know that this particular file here, the content has been end? It is using by a flag which is called e of f, which is called as the end of file itself. Now, having said this, in the binary file, it's a random, right? So we have a sequence of byte, but randomly we can, access this particular data, and it doesn't have any kind of like flags to indicate the end of file. Okay, we'll talk more about binary files and all in a subsequent sessions only. So you have to understand there are two types of file. One is a text file, which is also called a sequential file. Another is your binary file, or the random file is. So it's a sequence of character, it's a sequence of byte, and it is terminated in a text file. It is terminated using a new line character, and we have a flag to indicate the end of the file, which is called as e of f, end of file. And here we don't have any kind of flags to indicate the end of file. Again, there is some mistakes in this, the sequential word itself. Okay, so now we know the basic operations in files, like we need to name a file, we need to open a file, we need to read the file, we need to write the file, and then we need to close the file. So now, having said this, we may have some kind of basic file operation functions, which we're going to see in our subscription session itself. So first, we need to open a file. So we have a function called as fopen. So once you open a file, it should be closed. So we have to close the function. Like, we have get c, put c in order to get a character and put a character into the get a character from the file, put a character file. F printf, you need to take a string from file itself. As scanf, also you need to write into the file. Sorry, display from the file itself. So you need to f scanf is in order to what you say, write something into that particular file itself, right? Okay, so having said this, we have fsig. Okay, so we can move to a particular position in the file. Get w for some numbers, we can use put w. Tell me the position. We need to rewind the entire file itself. So most this particular function here, I will talk till most of the details. Each of this will going to use it. So you need to understand, we need to have function like f open to open it, f close to close it, in order to get a character, get c for the file. If you have to put a write something into the file itself, then you can have, right, easily you can do put c itself. Okay, yes. So if you write f printf, you can set a character value. You can write something into the file. F scanf will have, you can read something from the file itself, right? So printf means you're writing into the file. Scanf means you are reading from the file itself. Then we have f6, get w, put w, ftl, and rewind. As I was saying, we are going to discuss more about in the next what you say in my coming session itself, right? Now the thing is that how will you going to declare a file in C? This is interesting, right? When you are working with a file, okay, so we need to declare a file, and the keyword that is used is file. But this keyword is actually nothing but a structure, okay, defined as file, and it is defined in IO library in the standard stdio.h, right? Okay, and its implementation is hidden, and the only thing is that we can access using a pointer, which we call as a file pointer. So whenever you start working in file, you have to use this particular keyword, which is the file, which is nothing but a structure, right? And everything that will be operating will be nothing but the a pointer, okay, pointer of this particular of type file. So fp is nothing but a file pointer itself. And if you connect this fp with a particular file, then it will always will point to the first character of the file. If this is my file itself, okay, and this is some text that is written, today is a beautiful day, then fp will be pointing to the first character, which is nothing but t, right? So you have to understand, whenever you are declaring a file, We are using a keyboard file, even your keyword file, which is nothing but a structure itself as type def app file itself, and it is defined in the standard, stdio or library. Its implementation hidden, and we can only use pointer, which is the fp pointer pointing to. This is not always we can write fp, because this is something which it's the name of the pointer. So we can write fp, we can write fptr, we can write whatever we like, fps also. That is something which we can, but this is the already the keyboard, or the structure defined itself. So this has to be in capital. Okay, and this we can have our own name itself. So having said this, so this particular session we talked about file, why we require a file. So handling with printer, scanf in a small amount of data is not, because we will be working with various big applications where large amount of data has to be handled, and the data has to be stored and retrieved, and that can be only be possible with the concept of file. So file is nothing but a place in in your this itself, where you are storing the data itself. Like I gave an example, like C program itself, your resume itself. Okay, right? So these are the basic operations that we have in file. We need to have a naming of a file. We need to open a file. We need to close a file. We can read from a file, and we can write from a file. Apart from that, we have seen that a lot of functions which are associated with a file itself. These are nothing but like opening a file, f open, f close, put get c, put c, right? And then f printf, scanf, f tell, f seek, okay, put c, put w, and then rewind. And I've told you that each of these function we're going to discuss in detail. So having said this, so and also we talk about two types of file. That is, one is a text file, and another is a random file. Where text file, sequence of character, here sequence of bytes itself, and the text file will be having a flag which is called as end of file. Okay, here we don't have any kind of flags itself. And more we will see the example in kinds of binary file, and also in the text file itself, right? So I hope the entire concept is file. So we started the why file, real life application, then we talk about what the definition of a file, and we talk about the operations, right? And then we talk about the types of files. Then we see have discussed about the basic operations of the functions, basic operation function like f open, f close, and all these things, f6. And then we talk about declaring a file using the structure itself, the keyword find capital, and we always have a pointer which we call it as a file pointer. And I said find has to be always in capital, but fp we can give any name like fptr, fps, and all this thing, and fp will be always pointing to the first character of the file itself. Okay, so I hope you have understood file in the. So we will be discussing more about the file in my subsequent videos. Thank you so much, and do keep watching my video, and do subscribe my videos, and also share with your friends. Thank you so much.